Hello, everybody. As Graham said, Adrian Englefield is my name. And first of all, I have a very important message about being sun smart, as you can see from my face. Over the past few weeks, I've had many funny looks during online meetings, and I've recently finished an Effidex treatment, which is a cream that burns sun-damaged skin. And as you can see, there is plenty of red on my face at the moment. So as I said, it's a very important message. If you notice any changes with your skin, please don't hesitate to see a specialist and always be sun smart. This is something that I'm extremely vigilant with now, but it's something that in the past I could have been better at. And I certainly hope in a few weeks' time that I look 20 years younger once this is all healed up, and certainly makes me look a lot better anyway. So I've also included my ISO working picture from last year's lockdown. And we're currently in lockdown in regional New South Wales, like a lot of the country. So I'm most certainly thinking of everyone affected by the pandemic and the effect that it's currently having on extension projects, particularly face-to-face delivery and meetings that have been postponed, cancelled, or delivered by some alternative method such as online videos or webinars or other resources. So there's certainly a lot of uncertainty out there, particularly with planning, but fingers crossed we can all catch up for the APEN conference in Melbourne next February. So please keep that in mind, and it's something that I'm particularly looking forward to if we can get down to Melbourne. So before I continue with my introduction, I sent most of you a text message yesterday for a poll everywhere survey. I'm just wondering if you can get your phones out and follow that link, because after this next slide, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and it's got me very nervous as to whether or not the technology will work. So we'll see how we go. If you didn't receive a text message from me, could you please get your phone out and visit Poll EV, so POLLEV.com, and I'll provide further instructions in a moment. So Graham touched on my past experiences very quickly, but a little bit more about myself. I started my career growing wine grapes at a little place called Robinvale in northwest Victoria for 11 years on my family's vineyard. And there's a picture there with my eldest son in front of our Gregoire grape harvester. You can't see much of the vines in that picture, but that's a patch of Riesling that we used to grow. And I guess probably the most concerning thing for me is my son, Andy, that I'm holding, is going to turn 10 this year. So it's just amazing how quickly time goes by. And in 2015, I joined the New South Wales DPI as a development officer for viticulture, based here in Wagga at the National Wine and Grape Industry Centre. And I jumped into extension via the deep end. So in today's webinar, I hope to pass on some tips, tools that help me with M&E and to understand the many challenges faced with extension delivery, monitoring, evaluation through to reporting. And in February 2020, I joined Hort Innovation as the Regional Extension Manager for the Southeast. And I've been exposed to extension projects within the table grape, vegetable, turf, mushroom, and processing tomato industries, just to name a few. You can see on the map, the green area is the region that I cover, and it goes from the mid-north coast of New South Wales across to the Riverina area around Griffith, and then down into northern Victoria into the Goulburn Valley. And you can also see pictures of my colleagues within the Hort Innovation Extension team. And M&E is a critical component of extension. And at Hort Innovation, I'm part of a team currently updating our M&E reporting template and logic. So a few of you have beaten me to the call already, I can see, and have already populated a few responses. For those of you who need login details that went to polev.com, if you just type in Adrian, ENGLEF 970, you will be able to access this quick survey. And the first question I have is, what monitoring and evaluation insights are you looking for from today's webinar? And believe me, I'm very relieved that there's a few answers coming through. I was dreading that this mightn't work. In a previous webinar with my delivery partners and through other discussions, we've identified examples like benchmarking or baseline measurements, designing questions, the use of survey tools like Poll Everywhere. This is a great example of how you can collect insights. And I guess once you do have insights and feedback, how do you report your findings as well through monitoring and evaluation? So we've still got a few coming through there. Experiences, tips, measure, options, technology, change, some methods. I certainly hope through today's webinar that I can introduce some further resources to you. And it's a great opportunity to learn from each other as well. So I'll touch on the agenda in a moment. So I might just go across to the next question, and this should update automatically on your phone. I'm just looking to see if you could describe your monitoring and evaluation experience. Are you new to extension? Do you have advanced M&E skills, but always looking to improve? That's where I feel that's how I would answer this question. Are you experienced and confident in all M&E aspects? If you are, I might get you to contribute to today's webinar. And quite interestingly, I can see that nobody yet has answered that it's not applicable to their role, which is interesting because I've spoken to a number of extensionists and they've reported that M&E is looked after in their project by somebody else. And I argue that everybody can contribute to monitoring and evaluation by collecting insights and feedback. It's a very, very important part of their role and all projects. So if you do feel that that's the case, I certainly encourage you to contact me after this webinar if you want to follow up on any further details and certainly ask any more questions. So thank you for your insights. So in today's webinar, we are going to explore a MERI or Monitoring, Evaluation, Reporting and Improvement Framework. We are going to have a look at a project or a program logic and what does this mean and how does M&E play a role. I hope you're all familiar with, or will be after today, with changes in KASA or KASA, which is knowledge, attitudes, skills and aspirations, and practice change, which is a major focus of monitoring and evaluation. We're going to have a quick 10-minute breakout room discussion, and this is an opportunity, a peer-to-peer opportunity, to share your project M&E experiences and any resources, any challenges or successes that you've had with monitoring and evaluation. And when we return for the final half of the webinar, I will introduce an M&E toolkit. Now, we won't be able to fully cover every resource in great detail during today's webinar due to time. Some of the resources could be a webinar in themselves. But once again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask at any point or follow up with me afterwards. And from today's webinar, I will be developing a fact sheet that I will email out in a follow-up with a link to the recording as well. So let's dive into the webinar. So why do we as extensionists, project managers or delivery partners need to implement monitoring and evaluation? As you can see, monitoring and evaluation are key components of a MERI, monitoring, evaluation, reporting and improvement framework. I have also seen MER, where there is no improvement, and MEL, where there's monitoring, evaluation and learning within the framework. I personally would like to see another I for investment to make the case from your project for further investment in ideas or concepts or gaps that have been identified through your monitoring and evaluation. Taken from the Extension Oz website, MERI is a process designed to look at a project or program's effectiveness, impact, appropriateness, efficiency, and legacy. Assessing project performance and any change over time against short, medium, or long-term desired outcomes, or what my project is setting out to achieve, and at a broader level, is the project contributing to the overarching program or strategy goals? It is important to consider monitoring and evaluation as independent steps within the framework. Monitoring involves the regular collection and analysis of information to provide evidence and indicators of progress towards a strategic objective, or what is happening in my project. And evaluation seeks to make a judgment on the value or merit of a project to determine the achievement of stated objectives, or what happened and was it good. However, what do you personally want to measure, and is it included in project outcomes? We all want to produce outputs, being workshops or fact sheets, for growers, leading to KASA and practice change. But is there a value proposition for yourself? Does current M&E capture the full picture, e.g. your personal development, grower and industry relationships, or social capital? So I always ask through a MERI framework to consider the project M&E, but also yourself and your personal aspirations. And now this brings my attention to a program logic. This is used to help plan an extension program, or in our case, a project, and provide the basis for evaluating it. It is important to differentiate between a project as representing a single focused endeavour and a program as a collection of projects. The different projects complement each other to assist the program in achieving its overall objectives. So the program logic is modified for individual projects. Using a logic, and they're all different for different projects, the relationships between the desired outcomes and the activities and inputs required to achieve them can be worked out and illustrated as in the example logic shown. Regardless of the program or project logic used, key principles include planning backwards, to start with the long-term outcome or impact that is required from the project, i.e., what is the strategic purpose? Funding bodies may outline this during tendering, or your industry may have strategic planning documents to refer to. Identify what short and medium-term outcomes are required to meet long-term outcomes. Are there any external factors that will influence outcomes? Are there any political considerations? For example, at Hort Innovation, I manage a number of food safety projects, and there is R&D that is extended to growers. However, the delivery partners, and it has been identified, to be careful around that information is not misinterpreted or could contribute to a negative message that may end up in the media, for example, that could reduce confidence in the industry or demand for the product. We need to think about what outputs are required. These are the activities and participation, the workshops, the fact sheets, the videos, webinars, the kind of work that we do as extensionists in order to achieve the short-term outcomes. We need to define inputs and the resources that are required. I can just hear somebody's not on mute there. If you could.
Yeah, sorry, I just cut in. Could I get everyone to please mute their, yep, that'd be great. Thanks.
There we go. Sorry, where was that? So, to analyse the current situation and any priorities that will influence the achievement of the desired outcomes, I recommend using the business model canvas. This is a little bit off track for monitoring and evaluation, but I will touch on this later during the M&E toolkit discussion. I also recommend reviewing last year's APEN Extension Chat webinar titled What's New in Extension Evaluation by Jeff Coots. Jeff simplifies a project logic to project management, activities and objectives with performance indicators and an M&E method for each. Now, there is also a line of accountability after outcomes. Your project M&E identifies your unique contribution to the broader program goals, and the actions of other projects towards the broader goals are outside the scope and responsibility of your project. And I'll define this a little bit further in the next slide. Oh, got one too far. So, this is an example of a cotton program investment logic for successful crop production. And I'm often asked, what questions should I ask in a mentoring and evaluation process, and how often? For example, your project could be aiming to address the broader goal or impact in this table of increasing productivity by 3% per hectare per year. At a program level, this may be achieved by a number of different projects or investments. However, your project may be delivering against some or all of the intermediate outcomes and outcomes listed in Figure 5. Note the key performance indicators of 85% adoption of reduced pesticide practices, 50% adoption of practices leading to reduced pest, weeds, and disease, and changes in attitudes, knowledge, and awareness. It is important to ask questions addressing the project activity's contribution to these key goals or KPIs. Noting common language or lack of between logics. They are all different. These KPIs form the basis to develop questions for monitoring and evaluation purposes. And I also quickly wanted to retouch on KASA and practice change, and some of the questions I have received and thought about when monitoring and evaluating projects as seen in Bennett's hierarchy. KASA changes are generally expected in the short term and practice change thereafterward. So, limitations exist, including practice change benefits occurring well after a project ends. And from my time as a wine grape grower, all farmers make production changes each year depending on external factors, e.g. weather and market forces or new technologies. And I argue practice change can and does occur instantly. So ensuring project relevance will support continual practice change. So once again, considering and understanding external forces affecting your project through grower and stakeholder insights, including monitoring what is happening in my project and evaluation, what happened and was it good, are critical, as I've always found grower and stakeholder relationships and feedback important for successful extension delivery. So this is now going to bring us to our 10-minute breakout groups. Graham's going to split us into groups of approximately 4. And this is an opportunity for you to meet some of your colleagues in the extension space. But also, I'm interested to see if you have a M&E story to share, if you want to discuss some of your challenges and successes that you've had with monitoring and evaluation, and if you want to identify any resources or other useful tools that you've referred to as well, you can share them within your group. I do ask that one person in each group collects notes, just in dot point form, and please share these notes in the chat function when we return after 10 minutes. And once again, these insights from the breakout rooms, I'll be able to share with the handout or fact sheet that will follow after this webinar, and we'll be able to share some of the additional resources as well. But when we come back for the second half of the webinar, we will explore useful M&E resources that I've referred to. So I'll hand it over to Graham, and we'll send you all a 2-minute warning before the end of the breakout room. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Yes, look, I'll send you all into breakout rooms now.
So now this brings me to the what I think is the really fun part of the webinar, are the useful resources, or what are useful resources that we should be aware of. You may, of course, have others, and if you do, I certainly encourage you to share them in the chat function. And once again, I can share them with the whole group in the follow-up email and fact sheet that I present or send to everybody after this presentation, I should say. So the first resource in my toolkit is the Hort Innovation project resource page, containing the Hort Innovation M&E guide and template. Of course, I'm a little bit biased there, working for Hort Innovation, but this is publicly available and may not be applicable to most of you. However, if you are interested to have a read, please feel free to click on the link when I share it after the webinar. On this page, you can download project resources, including the remote extension tips and tools, which is a resource developed by the Hort Innovation Extension team in the early stages of COVID-19, when a lot of our delivery partners moved away from face-to-face meetings and workshops to online delivery. You can also see the project M&E guide and template, which are currently under review, as I mentioned earlier, by myself and my colleague, Olive Hood. Other organisations would have similar resources. And once again, if you do have similar resources you would like to share, please mention them in the chat function. The next one I would like to share is Extension Oz, and it is really exactly that, an extension community of practice with links to everything extension practice, including presentation skills, project management, and e-learning. As I mentioned early on, when I started with the New South Wales DPI in extension with my viticultural production background, I relied a lot on Extension Oz, on all sorts of extension skills, and M&E was just one of them. So if you have not already, I recommend having a look at and searching for resources and topics you seek advice on. And you may have noticed I referred to Extension Oz through this presentation with the earlier program logic and MERI framework. And another favourite of mine is the European Farm Demo Training Kit. There are tools and resources for preparing a demonstration event, a demo design guideline and on-farm demonstrations. But most importantly, for M&E, by clicking on the tools in the top right-hand side of the screen, there are evaluation and follow-up survey resources for M&E purposes. Once again, there is way too much to go through today. The Farm Demo Training Kit could be a webinar on its own. But this is a great resource. There's even a map to click on across Europe for various demonstration sites to view resources and project outputs. You can search via industry, location, and extension topic. And those tools for evaluation include, as I said, organisation of a demo event, monitoring the setup of a demo event, participant feedback, and monitoring that long-term impact. Which brings me to common survey methods and what is the best way to collect project participant insights and feedback. Does one method or tool work best? I am highly doubtful, and a multifaceted approach is best. For example, the Hort Innovation Processing Tomato Extension Project delivers to a very small amount of growers, approximately a dozen, plus industry participants, including agronomists and processors. So there's a few segments there. While other projects, such as VegNet, have many grower segments and demographics, including location, production systems, and languages spoken. And you do need to remember that some people just plain old don't want to share their insights. So, from my experience, often workshop surveys, or happy sheets, as I've referred to them as, would typically get a 50% response rate and be a lot of work to evaluate and report from. I often had to stand at the exit to the venue to make sure that people filled them in. However, while you have project participants, especially at an event, don't let them go. It's always harder to chase contacts up afterwards. Some e-survey resources that I will share links to in the follow-up email include Poll Everywhere, which we had a demonstration of earlier on. There's Slido, Doodle polls, Survey Monkeys, which I've created one for the exit poll. And I recently had a demonstration of Mentimeter. I have found data easier to evaluate and report from to create tables and graphs, etc., from these e-survey resources. However, there are some limitations. Not all workshops are held in great phone coverage areas, and farmers or anybody else do need basic skills to be able to use them. But that said, they're pretty user-friendly. We did pretty well today. But once again, developing relationships with growers is critical. You can inconspicuously ask growers questions. You can survey them without it really being a survey. Through old-fashioned conversations. Could be straight after an event or a certain period of time after the event. However, continually think and prepare the questions you will ask and record the insights. As well as the farm demo website links, see the University of California program evaluation resources, including survey templates. Remembering to tie back to the strategic project purpose or KPIs. Most questions cover direct event feedback. So how were the presentations, the venue, the timing of the workshop, how good was the coffee? Changes in thinking or awareness, being KASA. So what did people learn? What information did they absorb? And finally, practice change or planned practice change. Once again, it's very difficult or near impossible to measure practice change straight away at the event. Often that is, you'll have to follow up with them later on, but you can certainly look for the aspirations for practice change and monitor those as well. I'll just bring that next slide up, which brings me to the business model canvas. And I touched on this earlier. The business model canvas reflects systematically on a business model, or in our case, a project activity, allowing segment by segment focus. You can start with an activity planning brain dump, often for 10, 15 minutes, filling out the segments that spring to mind first, and then work on the empty segments to close any gaps. In my experience, I was not too focused on cost structure and revenue streams for an extension event focused on KASA and practice change. However, if there is a commercialisation approach or opportunity, it is very relevant. And you can see from the right-hand side of the canvas, which addresses customer relationships, customer segments and channels, that's very much targeted towards your audience, as where the left-hand side is really what you need to do or focus on as well, being key resources, activities and partnerships, which all come together to help create a value proposition for the work in your project or your activity. I use this template in the New South Wales DPI AgTech Incubator to redesign VineWatch, a viticulture extension newsletter reporting from 11 New South Wales wine growing regions. And as a tool to develop and refine value propositions, I also use the business model canvas when assessing feedback to map out and identify delivery gaps, especially from those top 7 segments for M&E reporting and continual improvement, including understanding my audience. A quick Google search will give other business model canvas examples and segment questions. And this is something I recommend as a powerful project management tool. However, after we have feedback and insights from our audience or participants, what then? How do I report? Once again, your project or funding body will almost certainly or almost definitely hope they have reporting templates and guidelines to follow, very similar to the Hort Innovation ones that I outlined earlier. However, after a successful extension event leading to improvements in KASA or practice change, we want to communicate the results and value of the outputs and outcomes. We want to create support for our project to provide accountability through reporting. And we also want to meet funding body annual evaluation requirements. An outcome or impact statement highlights the value or difference, both positive or negative, the project has made against predetermined project outcomes or KPIs. So I've created a fictional example. The Viticulture Pest and Disease Workshop was attended by 30 people and was well received with strong industry support. But what is this telling me, or those that you report to? To improve this outcome statement, I've added a short title. I've described the issue in a few sentences. Who cares and why? So powdery mildew reduces yield and wine quality. What has been done? What was the extension response to the issue? We hosted a workshop that included biological and cultural practices and management, and that was presented by Dr. John Smith. And what was the impact? Can we describe the impact or the so what? 80% of respondents indicated they improved awareness of biological and cultural prevention measures. And all agronomists reported powdery mildew as a regional issue. and grower control measures can be improved. But what else could I add? I simply couldn't fit everything on the slide, and there's one key one that I definitely left out. We can include funding sources, identify the funding sources from the project. We can add contact details, and we can personalise these outcome statements for the many individual attendees. However, the big thing that we've missed is that we could have articulated project activity value by including a quick measure against or addressing project KPIs. And we could also track participants, new participants, and changes over time. We could measure baselines and improvements. And this could be a sample group throughout the project life cycle. So, for example, a dozen growers that you've monitored and evaluated through the life cycle of the project. Remember, be specific about participant behaviour changes. What did they do? As I said, 80% of attendees improved disease management awareness, and 75% will implement new strategies. Agronomists identified a lack of grower knowledge or a gap for future activities. Mention the evaluation methods. How was the data collected? And define the project connection to outcomes. And include quantification, numbers, percentages, etc. So please see the resources links. Examples are given in Evaluation Methods by Jeff Coots, and Effective Impact or Outcome Statements by Tennessee State University. So I am near the end of the webinar at the moment, but I also wanted to touch on case studies and how you can tell a story, or telling your story can also be an extension output, leading to further outcomes. And a great example is the Soil Wealth and Integrated Crop Protection Program. Feedback, data, and insights can be used to report against and create further extension activities. Evaluation Methods by Jeff Coots includes a case study template, identifying key steps of outlining the situation, links to projects, changes made through adoption or reduced costs, impact benefit, relevance to other producers, and of course, resources that are available as well. So, most importantly, I hope from today's webinar, you familiarise yourself with the example survey resources when I send them out. Look to see how you could measure against project strategic outcomes or KPIs, and use this feedback to create detailed outcome statements and case studies. M&E is not designed to be onerous and has many benefits, and there are many project resources available if you reach out to your colleagues, funding bodies, or APEN, for example. This will always assist project reporting when those dreaded milestone reports come around. Thank you. And I just might open it up, Graham, to some questions and discussions for 5 minutes. Yep. If anybody has any questions or comments.
Yes, actually, we have got a comment there from Donna Lucas. She's just pointed out there's some useful M&E information in the New Zealand booklet Over the Fence, designing extension programs to bring about practice change. So I just, people can take note of that in the chat. The other thing also in the chat, I've actually placed in the exit survey link when you, for people to actually to complete an exit survey for the webinar. That would be great. I'll now open it up to anybody else for the other questions that you might have. Please unmute yourself and just ask the questions, probably the easy way to go. Nothing there at this stage. So, Adrian, it's interesting to see the number of resources that are actually out there. And one of the challenges that we find with extension projects when they're developed, I often find that they often don't put enough attention into developing up an evaluation framework in the course of the project itself. What's the perspective of your perspective now, having worked for Hort Innovation? How do you see its role in ensuring that there is greater emphasis put on evaluation in project proponents?
Well, I think the big message to address that, Graham, that I have, I am a big fan of the business model canvas, and really around addressing that value proposition for growers. I think that any successful extension project or program really addresses the type of issues that keeps growers up at night, the things that are really going to make a big difference to their bottom line or their sustainability or other issues that are really affecting them. So for myself, I would encourage people to familiarise yourself, if you're not, with the business model canvas. And as I touched on before, my colleague and I, Olive Hood, are working on updating the M&E guide and templates for industry development and extension projects at Hort Innovation. And once they are updated, I'll be more than happy to share them with the group as well, Graham. It is an area that we are looking at the moment.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks for that. As I said, it's very important that we do share resources as much as possible across industries. I think there's a great opportunity to do that. Too often, many of the industries do tend to be a little bit inwards looking and not necessarily expand their focus beyond the current industry, and that can also happen at a district level too as well. So really important to take these opportunities. Have we any other questions from any of our participants?
Graham, it's Donna. I've got one.
Yes, Donna.
So Adrian, have you got any tips for how to measure and evaluate attribution where there might be several projects working in the same topic or group?
That's a very good question, Donna.
A very good question.
In short, I'll probably have to take that one on notice and get back to you. Once again, it's something at Hort Innovation that Olive Hood and myself are looking at, as to how, as I touched on before, that your individual project can address goals that are, industry-based goals, or at Hort Innovation, we have our strategic investment plans that identify the KPIs for the industry. And yes, your project may address one of those, but so could or its contribution to addressing that KPI, but so could a number of other projects as well at the same time. So that is something that we're working on, Donna, and I don't have an exact answer for that, but other than through effective monitoring and evaluation within your project, that contribution that you make towards that overarching strategic KPI can be measured, and that's the most important thing, as well as making sure that the project is on track and meeting grower requirements at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose with surveys, you can word the question where it says, have you done X, Y, or Z as a direct result of this project, for example? So it's a different question than saying, have you changed this practice? Yeah.
And there's some interesting ones.
Sorry, Adrian, go ahead.
Oh, there's some interesting insights that I heard as well about, for monitoring and evaluation, do we necessarily always have to rely on surveys? Are there some benchmarked data within your industry, for example, that a peak industry body or a leading grower group may have on current practices? There are resources as well, such as ABS data at the same time that you can rely on, somewhat. But whether or not your industry has some of those key production benchmarks as well, they can be utilised as well. So it's important to scan the whole, within your industry for those resources as well.
I think that's a really important point, that often there are other sources of information through other parts of the production chain or distribution chain that might actually provide information without you having to directly ask growers themselves. And also there is a little bit of an issue of being over-surveyed, which is always a challenge within industries, but it's certainly something that we do need to be aware of, that there may be other sources of information we can use also. Donna's point about attribution is a really important one. One of the challenges when undertaking short-term projects, of course, is that sometimes the impact of those projects might actually happen after the close of the project. So attribution becomes really challenging in that situation as well.
Rightio. So I don't know if anyone's got an answer to my question on oranges
yeah.
at all. Does anyone have any thoughts on that one? Well, I'm just going to head over. Sorry, I'm just going to head over to my final slide, which is a little bit of the broader context at APEN to please look out for and keep up to date with APEN news and events, including the monthly e-bulletin and the quarterly Extension Net magazine. You all have my details once this presentation is shared, so please feel free to follow up with me if you have any further questions or comments. But as Graham said before, what would an M&E webinar be without a final survey on the way out? So I would like to thank you all for your time today, and Graham has populated a link to a Survey Monkey in the chat function, and I don't know if you can hear my kids, they've all just got home as well, making noise in the background, so that's my fault, that one. So once again, thank you very much for your time today, and fingers crossed we'll see you all in Melbourne for the APEN conference.
Yes, thanks, Adrian. I'd like to thank you for your input into the webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for participating today and joining in. I look forward to catching up with you again in a couple of months' time with the next webinar. Please take the opportunity to have a look, to grab hold of that Survey Monkey URL link that's in the chat, and complete that for Adrian. That would be much appreciated. And in the next, hopefully within the week, we'll have a copy of this survey made available, this webinar made available online through the APEN website. Thanks again.